Salutations from space and aloha from Earth. This is Gemini Brett of More Than Astrology with a video about your shamanic direction and a bit about astrocartography and astro relocation. We're going to use an example chart of a dude I know kind of well. His name is Gemini Brett, born in Boston, Massachusetts, Friday, Venus's Day, October 24th, 1975, 7:39 p.m. with the 10th degree of Gemini on the rise. Now, I'm fond of saying what was rising when you rose is rising within you, and you are here to raise it up. So it's rising within you. Gemini is what I'm here to learn. I'm a student of the Gemini Mystery School, and I'm here to raise it up. As I engage with that study, Gemini will also learn from me, because just like us, the archetypes, I believe, do evolve. Perhaps specifically this 10th degree of Gemini, or 9 degrees 36 minutes of Gemini, and perhaps specifically this direction of Earth, because it is a direction. And this is what I like to say is your shamanic direction, the direction or azimuth of the ascendant at the time of your birth. Some of this philosophy evolved from the shamanic astrology paradigm visioned forth by Daniel Gemario, who sees the forward direction as the ascendant. Yeah, this is why I call myself Gemini Brett, though I'm a Scorpio. I have a Gemini moon and a Gemini ascendant. And this theory is not necessarily brand new. One of the ancient words for the ascendant or the rising sign was the helm. Yeah, so I like to think of this as this is where the boat of our soul is being blown or being steered. Some have interpreted that helm idea as, well, this is the steersman, because the first house is you and how other people see you, and you're steering your boat into your direction. And many people say that now as the North Node. Yeah, I work with the North Node as a place of fate, but in a different way, I like to say that this is where the boat of your soul is being blown. And one of the great arts of the chart is to become conscious of that, and then to consciously choose to steer yourself there instead of being, well, blown willy-nilly by the winds of fate. In a sense, the most beautiful thing about the path is you can't leave it, but there's something very powerful about aligning yourself consciously and knowingly moving forward. And to bring this gift also to this school, yeah, to receive from it and to give back. And that's my idea of the ascendant, and my idea, at least how I work with it, of this very specific direction. So if I'm in a ceremony or a meditation, out stargazing, intently or whatever, I might call on the directions. I usually start in the east and south and west and north and above and below and these kinds of things. But when I close the directions at the end of a ceremony, I tend to personally face northeast, where Gemini rises. And for me specifically, 59.7 degrees azimuth. And I'm going to tell you why that is and show you some free softwares that you can utilize to find your own. All right. But before we look at that shamanic direction, we're going to utilize the principles that have already been developed in astrocartography and planet lines to show you the concept of why this is a specific direction. All right. So first, let's talk about astrocartography. And one place you can go to generate free astro maps for yourself is at astro.com. It's an incredible resource with so many different free offerings. Yeah. So at astro.com, you start a profile, you enter your birth information, and I can go to free horoscopes and astro click travel. All right. I have a few different, I don't know if that didn't work. Here we go. Astro click travel. I want to make sure my chart, Gemini Brett, selected, and I'm going to go to a scalable Google map. All right, go. And it's going to be centered on my birthplace, which is actually an option, but this cross right here, this is Boston, Massachusetts, where I was born, and we see all these colorful lines, yeah? So what are they? Well, let's just take some examples. Let's go to Seattle, where I live now. And I'll zoom in a little bit, and what we'll find in Seattle is that very close by, I've got Moon IC, this blue line. What does that mean? It's actually stronger through Portland. close to Salem and Eugene. It actually goes all the way down to the Bay Area. I've lived in San Francisco a little bit. I've spent more time close by in Monterey. But that's the moon at the IC line. So what is that about? And what does it, first of all, even mean technically? And then what are the energetics about it? So the cool thing in astro.com too is I can click on that line and I can read what they have to say about moon at the IC. Leads to places where you can address your personal concerns and aspirations, yada, yada, yada. You can read these for yourself. Favorable for real estate transactions. It is the first place I ever bought a house, and I've actually lived in the house that I'm recording this video from for more time than any other place I've lived in my life, because one of the things about the moon at the IC is it might be very comfortable. Okay, so first of all, why is the moon at the IC in Seattle, where I live? All right, so I'll go back to my chart here. This is my Boston chart, but if I relocated it to Seattle, and what I'm going to do is just add a transit wheel. The inner wheel is me in Boston. The outer wheel is me in Seattle. All right. Actually, let's just look at that. So one thing I want to say, if you do this with your charts, make sure the sun is at the very same degree as it was when you were born. Okay. In my case, 0 degrees, 56 minutes, Scorpio. And indeed, 7:39 p.m. in Boston, East Coast time zone, is 4:39 p.m. in Seattle, West Coast time zone. Yeah. So it's all good. We'll take my chart away, because when you astro relocate, you're going to see some strong lines and these kinds of things in travel maps or even more detailed astrocartography maps. But you also want to look at your entire chart for that place on the globe. Yeah. So here is the moon at the IC, and it's a very strong line, right? Now, if I moved myself to Portland, it would get even more exact, and we see that that's what's happening here. In fact, it's often said that you want to be west of the line, all right? And actually neither Seattle or Portland are west of the line. Salem is. So if I had been born in Salem and not Seattle, the moon wouldn't be on the 3rd house side of the IC, but it would be on the 4th house side, all right? So another example here would be like Venus in the 6th. And I'm going to get right back to that. But let me just point out here as well, the asteroids don't show up on the Astro Click Travel map. There might be an option where I can put them in on astro.com. I actually haven't looked. There are a couple of things that I can click right here. So one, I can click Disharmonious Aspects. Is that going to be a trouble place for me? And we do see here moon squaring the ascendant if I was born over on the eastern side of the state. And it's not just if I was born there. The idea of astrocartography or relocation is that if I relocated here, if I moved to Yakima, instead of feeling this moon at the IC energy, I might feel more of the moon squaring my ascendant descendant axis. And that one might not feel as good. All right. Like I grew up in Las Vegas, Nevada. All right. Very close to the Mars at the IC line. And they're going to show that as favorable, yet Mars down there at the place that's so much about home and roots might not feel as comfortable as the moon down there. And you wouldn't be watching this video if you didn't know why I say that, I don't think. All right, so the asteroids, the disharmonious aspects, the harmonious aspects as well. So one thing that's really strong in Seattle, we can see it's almost exact here, is Chiron trining my midheaven. All right, let's confirm that on the chart. My midheaven, if I had been born in Seattle, and the idea is now that I've lived here for so long, in a way, this is my local midheaven. It's the galactic center about 25.5 degrees Sagittarius. Well, look at Chiron, 25.5 degrees Aries. Yeah. I mean, it's a perfect trine shown here by this blue line, 120 degrees. So to be very benefic, supportive. And if you know of my work in Seattle, well, a Chiron retrograde in Aries trining a Sagittarius midheaven actually resonates pretty well with who I am. All right, so moon at the IC. We don't see the asteroids in that chart. I'm going to show you another chart in a second where they will show up. I wanted to point out real quick that this asteroid here, this is Juno. This is not usually her glyph, which is an asterisk over the cross of matter. For the goddess of relationship, I really enjoy this asteroid that this older version of Intrepid software used. But if you know Juno, that's not typically her glyph. So I just wanted to point that out. So Venus in the 6th. Well, I mean, Venus is goddess of love, and 7th being the cusp of relationship. Maybe if I was looking for love, I really want to move west a ways to get Venus into the 7th house. So I just want to show that here because we see in my Seattle chart, Venus is in the 6th. And this is why you will read about being west of the line, okay? Because all they're showing really, especially if you don't look at the harmonious or disharmonious aspects, are where planets would be at the angles, okay? So either the rising sign, the setting sign. In this case, here's Venus at the descendant, the setting sign, the midheaven, the top of the chart, right? 10th house cusp, or the IC, the bottom of the chart, 4th house cusp. All right. So anywhere on this side of this green Venus at the descendant line, she's actually in the 6th house, as we saw in my Seattle chart. So I've got to get west of that line if I want to bring Venus up into the 7th house. The more I speak about it, the more interesting that sounds. All right. So, oh, here's one, Port Hardy. All right, so I can relocate this to Port Hardy, Canada. If I can spell, I can. Let's try that again. Canada, P-O-R-T-H-A-R. Okay, Port Hardy. And then I've got to get it back to my birth time. So what I do is just make sure I'm before, and then I can use Intrepid's awesome controls just to put the sun at 0 degrees, 56 minutes Scorpio, and I know then it's my birth moment. But now, if I had been born in Port Hardy, Canada, where I would have had the 6th degree of Pisces on the rise, 20 degrees even, Sag at the midheaven, and look at Venus right there in the 7th house, yeah? So Port Hardy, as you can see, that's right here. It's kind of further from that line, but there's not many towns to try, and I knew that one would show up in my software. Are there any other harmonious aspects nearby? Pluto trine the ascendant, pretty close. So how does that show? Here's Pluto for me in the sign of Libra, all right? And the ascendant is Pisces. Actually, to me, that one doesn't really make sense. In fact, it's just wrong. That is not a trine that's happening there. That's an inconjunct. So I'm not sure what's going on in the astro click travel, but that's, again, another reminder that if you're looking at this stuff, so if I wanted to read about the Pluto trine or sextile ascendant line, it's a very good idea to also cast a chart for yourself in that location at your exact birth time and make sure that it's right, okay? So yeah, Venus in the 7th, but Pluto is not trining the ascendant here. Not sure really what that's about. I'm gonna go back to Seattle, and we're going to look at the asteroids rising. All right, so Vesta had just risen, Pallas is about to, and you know, I'm noticing that this is 4:35:25, so I'm going to put this back to 4:39 p.m. because that's what's on my birth certificate. Rectified if I had been born in Seattle. So here's these two goddesses that had risen. I'm going to show you an image here from Solar Fire's Astrocartography. I don't have that software, but this was made for me by a friend. And here in Seattle, so here's like Vesta rising, and here's Pallas Athena rising. This one doesn't show the moon at the IC, which just means he didn't have that option alive, I guess. Here is Venus at the descendant. All right, but really importantly here, what I want you to see is this curve, this red curve. This is what's called a Mercury space line or local space line. And here's one for Jupiter, all right? Goes right here through this corner of Oregon, Nevada, California, and goes into the Pacific Ocean. And actually, here's a map of Hawaii. There's that same Jupiter line, which had curved down here, right, into the ocean, and then goes right to the northwest of Kauai Island. All right, so we're going to see that in Google Earth. We're going to open that in a second. Anything else I want to show here? Does that make sense to you, this concept of relocation and what this is in AstroClick travel? You know, let's go to one more place. I'm heading over to Japan in a little bit. You know, let's go to two places. One, I want to show you Boulder, Colorado, where I lived for a long time. And so here is my birth chart again. And then I'm going to bring in a Colorado chart for Boulder. All right. I want to make sure that the sun is at the exact same degree where it was when I was born. And, you know, I'm noticing one thing that's happening when I do that in this method is it's getting like the 35 p.m. instead of the 39. So I've got to adjust for that. It's going to be a very slight shift, but I will. And look, if I had been born in Boulder, it's a Jupiter rising line for me. Yeah. So that's a really beautiful thing to see Jupiter rising. I don't think I have an astro chart where I could show you that. We'll see it later, maybe in space. Well, I could go just here, I guess, in the astro.com chart, and we'll cruise over to Boulder. And what you'll see is that there is a Jupiter rising line for me through Colorado. There it is, this pink line, Jupiter at the ascendant through Denver, pretty close to Colorado Springs. And notice how it's east of Denver, and it's just west of Boulder. Actually, that's not true. It's east of Boulder, which is interesting because that should put Jupiter just below the horizon. So something's not agreeing in the way that my times enter, the way that the 39th minute is calculated in astro.com versus Intrepid software, because literally minutes can shift these lines pretty rapidly. All right, so either way, actually, I'm just speaking incorrectly. Boulder is west of the line. That's the point of the thing, right? So Boulder being west of the line, that puts Jupiter into the 12th house, really right above the horizon, as you see here. All right. So what happened for me in Boulder, I mean, I started a band, some great musicians who to this day, I will say, play a little bit beyond, maybe a lot bit beyond my personal caliber. And we got big fast and played a big theater, right? And so Jupiter makes things big, yeah? There were also Jupiter rising energies of exuberance and possible bad behaviors running amok. I can say that might also have been part of my thing in Boulder. I was a younger man then. Anyway, so astrocartography, when you look at places you've lived around the globe, you will find things to be pretty incredibly spot on, you know? So with astrology, we can learn all these concepts academically, intellectually, but unless we want to go out there and feel into this, you know, we can't really necessarily embody a practice until we experience it, right? All right, so here I am in Tokyo because I'm going to be traveling there to visit my sister who just relocated there pretty soon, all right? And we see here in Tokyo, Venus at the midheaven, all right? And Tokyo, east of that line, so if I really wanted to bring her into the 10th house, I would want to look more at like Osaka, right, in these towns over here, but it's very close, yeah? So Venus are, you know, I can just read about what does Venus at the midheaven mean, and here's astro.com's point of view. And I'm like, well, I shouldn't go there without bringing a saxophone. You know, it's a place where my art can really be seen, but I'm also an artist of the chart, right? All right, what about harmonious aspects? And I see Saturn trining the ascendant. I mean, they meet really close to Tokyo, right? What about disharmonious aspects? Here's Neptune squaring the midheaven. All right, and that's because I have Neptune square my Venus on my natal chart. So let's take a look at my chart. Were I born in Tokyo? Whoa, I guess I'm gonna have to start with calling it Japan and Tokyo. There we go. And again, I'm going to put the sun to 0 degrees 56 minutes Scorpio, and we'll say that's close enough for jazz. So here she is, right? Venus right at the midheaven of this chart, right? And actually, I guess if I do go to 8:39 p.m. instead of this 8:35 business, what we're going to see, oops. I don't know why the software seems to be freaking out here, but it does. And maybe it was 8:39 a.m. Okay, good. So here's Venus. You can see how she's in the 9th house, right? The 10th house cusp is 1506. So she hasn't quite gotten there. And again, that's because Tokyo is east of that line rather than west of it. Yeah, so definitely close enough to experience that energy. But if I really wanted to get technical, I might want to check out some of these zones. All right. And then disharmonious aspect, why are they calling Neptune square the midheaven disharmonious? All right, so let me just say this about the Astroclick travel maps. If you use astro.com for this, they only show planets at the angles. All right, if you don't use the aspects, these are only going to be planets or the nodes rising, setting, culminating, which means at the midheaven, or at the very bottom of the chart at the IC. Okay, so 1st house, 4th house, 7th house, 10th house cusps. All right, and that's it. You can bring in harmonious aspects, and it's going to show you where planets are either sextile or trine to any of those quadrant houses on the chart. So here's Saturn trine the ascendant, right? So the ascendant in Tokyo for me, the 3rd degree of Sag, and see I have Saturn in the 3rd degree of Leo. So this is Saturn trining the ascendant. A perfect trine will always happen between signs of the same element. Yeah, Saturn and Sagittarius are both fire signs. Well, sorry, Leo and Sagittarius are both fire signs. I just happen to have Saturn in Leo in my song, in my birth chart, right? And so that's why we see Saturn trine ascendant in my Tokyo chart, right? And so astro.com, you can read about that here. They're basically saying Saturn sextile or trine, good. Trine even better than sextile, not as much as if Saturn itself was rising. And then they're calling anything squaring these quadrant houses bad. And that's, you know, a little extreme. Do what you will with that. What a beautiful free resource astro.com provides. I would say you want to look a little bit beyond that energetically, yeah? So what about Neptune trining the midheaven? Well, here it is. My Neptune's in Sagittarius, yeah? So 10th degree of Sag, and there's Neptune, this pink line here, a square 90 degrees to the midheaven. I see the vertical axis. All right. So there we see astrocartography, astro relocation. I hope that not only helps to invite you to utilize these techniques and to check them out and see places where you've lived before and see if that makes sense to you, but also helps to bring the theory into ground for you and into understanding. So we're not just going with what we're told or what we read on some sidebar. And what I will say again is, if you say, okay, I'm going to go to these lines, wow, Jupiter rising, that sounds really good. Oh, and Boulder sounds cool, I'm going to go there, right? Well, then make sure you also cast an entire wheel, right? So Tokyo, wow, putting Venus at the midheaven, that is a good idea, especially if I want to be seen and honored for my art, right? But let's make sure I also see that in Tokyo, I'm Sag rising. You know, this isn't even my birth chart because it's past the date line. I've got to go to October 25th. I noticed that because my moon was in the wrong degree, but everything else barely changed, right? So either way, that's a place where I could go look into Venus rising or Venus at the midheaven. Saturn trining the ascendant, you know, a place on Earth where both of those energies are alive. But let's make sure, too, that I'm checking out, well, what is my sun Uranus in the 11th house versus in the 6th where I was born, right? What about the moon in the 7th, right? How do I feel about that, right? So that's what I'm saying. Like, make sure you also cast a full chart. And if you're not that far advanced in your own astrology, talk to an astrologer about it, right? Book a reading with somebody. All right. So now out of Massachusetts, and this is something that is not shown again on the Astro Click, is they're not showing me these planet lines as we saw here. This Mercury line coming through Salem, this Jupiter line, right, coming there. And let's just look at, well, what is it that Mercury's just beaming through Salem like this? All right, so let's make a chart for Salem, Oregon. There we go. And then again, I want to make sure it's my right birth time, which is actually West Coast, 4:39 p.m., October 24th, 1975. There's my sun in 056 Scorpio, yeah. And so look, with Seattle, I had both Vesta and Pallas had risen. Here in Salem, Vesta had risen, Pallas is just about to, in fact, she's exact the ascendant, and that's pretty cool if you're an astrologer like I am. All right, so what do we see? We saw there was a Mercury line. Well, how is that reflected? I mean, see, I see Mercury in the 7th house here. He's pretty far from the descendant. This is not a Mercury descending line, right? I could go over here and say, all right, well, where is a Mercury descending line? And that's going to be, I guess, pretty far out into the ocean here. Is it further? Maybe he's the other way. Am I confusing us all? Right, here's my Mercury descending line. All right, it actually goes through eastern Colorado, Wyoming, New Mexico. I might want to look into that one a little bit later. But check that out. I mean, Mercury here is 20 degrees from setting, and it's pretty far on the globe, right? Anyway, we saw this Mercury space line, and yet that doesn't really show up on the chart. So what is that? All right. And actually what we're going to do is we're going to look at this Jupiter space line that goes through here, goes through Mount Shasta for me actually, and again, out into the Pacific and then curves just over Kauai. So we're going to see that in a couple of free software programs. One is called Stellarium, which you can download at stellarium.org. It's an amazing astronomy software. And my coming video course of Sacred Astronomy, Astronomy for Astrologers, The Marriage of Heaven and Earth, which you can find out more about at morethan.astrology.com. Sign up for my free newsletter and you will hear about when it will be released, which should be the end of 2016, beginning of 2017. It's going to be a very long, intensive video course about being able to see the chart in the sky and be able to see the sky in the chart. All right, so we're going to go to my birth time here. Pause time. We're going to bring it to Boston, where I was born. You're going to hear the computer fan starts running with big software like this. All right, so I was born again 1975, October 24th, 7:39 p.m., which is 1939, right, in 24-hour style. But the Stellarium is set to my computer's clock, which is set for Seattle. So I've got to subtract a few hours to rectify this to Pacific time. So I put in 1639. So here we go. All right, this is my birth chart. All right, here's Jupiter, right? And look, my birth chart, oh, I got to bring my birth chart back in here. There we go. Jupiter is the only visible planet above the horizon at the time of my birth, okay? So the ascendant-descendant axis is the horizon. It is the ground. Here's Venus, the only visible planet up there. Everyone else is asteroids, or Neptune was just setting when I was born. None of that's visible, yeah? Either is Uranus or Pluto, right? So Jupiter, in that sense alone, just think of this as like an experiential astrology. This is the only light of a planet that the doctor could have held me up to when he spanked me so I could have a first breath. Wait, what is that about? Anyway, Jupiter is a very principal guide for me. Yeah, retrograde in Aries in the 11th house in these aspects. We'll hear that from astrology often, but what about the fact that Jupiter was the only visible planet at the time of my birth? All right. So now a very common mistake that's often taught by astrologers is that the ascendant is east. And it is east-ish, it is eastern. Twice a day, if 0 Aries or 0 Libra is rising, the equinox points, it is due east, which is what I like to call east, capital east, right? Due east. But Gemini is north of east, just as Sagittarius or Capricorn is south of east. So we'll show that a little bit because this comes into direction. The only 2 cardinal directions on a quadrant house system chart are shown in the midheaven and the IC. This is the north-south line. For those of us born in the northern hemisphere, above the Tropic of Cancer, the midheaven is always due south. In the IC, the bottom of the chart is always due north. It is below the earth, because this is the ground, towards the north, all right? And this is where the ecliptic, the path of the sun, and for the most part the planets, the zodiac, intersects the north-south line, which is called the meridian, okay? So this right here is my midheaven. This is the beginning of the 10th house using quadrant house systems. And what I love about the porphyry house system is it just takes this space from the midheaven to the ascendant, which is where the ecliptic or the zodiac intersects the horizon, towards the east. But see how far my 10th degree of Gemini rising is from due east, right? And this is what I'm saying is my shamanic direction. Just as my descending, my setting sign, this is the 7th house cusp. See how far south of west or due west that is, right? So my direction for the forward direction is here, and kind of the relationship world, the 7th house cusp is here. And we'll see, it doesn't look like it when I'm looking at this sky like stereographically as I can in Stellarium, but this point is exactly opposite. The descendant will always be exactly opposite. So you can add 180 degrees to your ascendant and you will get the what's called azimuth, or the direction of your descendant. Now look at porphyry house systems. They just take everything from the midheaven to the ascendant and split them up into 3 equal slices. It's an old system. It's actually older than porphyry. And I love it because I can see it with my face when I look at the sky. I can draw this chart. Also splitting from the descendant to the midheaven into 3 equal slices. First, second, third are a reflection of the 7th, 8th, 9th. 4th, 5th, 6th are a reflection of the 10th, 11th, 12th. Okay. And look how much smaller these houses are. Why? Because the descendant is so much closer to the midheaven than the ascendant is for me and for everyone else who has Gemini rising. All right. So again, if you want to learn more about that stuff, if you want to learn to see the chart in the sky and to see the sky in the chart, please check out my forthcoming video course. It might even be out by the time you see this video. The Marriage of Heaven and Earth. Now, here's Jupiter, right? The only visible planet in the sky at the time of my birth. So I'm very interested in where Jupiter might guide me. All right. So Stellarium will give me lots of information about Jupiter. And one thing I want to show you here is the azimuth and altitude. Okay, especially the azimuth. The altitude, 25 degrees, means that Jupiter is 25 degrees above the ground. You see that? All right. But the azimuth is going to be Jupiter from north. All right, so I could measure Jupiter to east here, all right, about 16 degrees, right? And east is 90 degrees of north. For azimuth, you begin at north is 0 degrees. East is 90 degrees. Jupiter is 16 degrees. Further is going to be 106 degrees azimuth. In fact, 106, 15, there are 15 minutes, or 60 minutes in a degree. So 15 minutes is 1/4 of a degree. So 106.25 is my Jupiter direction. All right. And we're going to see how we already got to take a peek at that in that solar fire astrocartography. But what I'm very interested in, what I'm here to share with you, is what is the direction of that. That is my ascendant, where the ecliptic, the zodiac, the path of the sun, and for the most part the planets, intersects the horizon on the eastern side of the sky at the time of my birth. All right. So I could say, well, what's my rising star? if you know the correlation of the tropical zodiac in our day and age of precession, you will know that the 10th degree of Gemini is the eye of the bull. Take the ground away. Aldebaran. All right, very bright and powerful star. And so I could say, hey, I'm 10th degree Gemini rising. Aldebaran happens to live at the 10th degree, right? And so Aldebaran is my rising star. In fact, I could, just for the sake of science, I will put Aldebaran onto this chart wheel. Go down here to the constellation, not the sign, called Taurus, and I can select Aldebaran, and there it is. All right, so you can see how Aldebaran 928 is just about to rise. I mean, for all intents and purposes, most every astrologer would say that that then is my rising star. And I work with Aldebaran in that way. And yet, is it really? Because it couldn't be seen. And remember, too, that there's city buildings and hills and stuff like that. So really the Pleiades is something that I often work with in this regard. I work with the Hyades, which is this V shape that we're pretty familiar with in the sky. Or I'll draw a line from the Pleiades to Aldebaran when I'm looking at them. Yeah, and kind of say, oh, that's my zone, right? Like this is literally where the boat of my soul is being blown, or preferably being steered. That's my vibe here, right? So where is that direction exactly? And then I'm very interested in seeing, well, where does it map on Earth? All right, so I can bring the ground back, and now I'm going to bring in this grid, and we'll see it's about 60 degrees, okay? So 30 degrees north of east, or 60 degrees east of north. But let's get a little bit more specific with it. I can zoom in here, and we will see 59 degrees, 40 minutes, and get a little closer even, 59 degrees and 42 minutes. All right. Again, 60 minutes in a degree. If I divide 42 by 60, I get 0.7. So my ascendant, and this is what I'm calling my shamanic direction, is 59.7 degrees azimuth. All right, so remember that one, 59.7, and remember 106.25 for Jupiter. We're going to get out of Stellarium, and we are going to get into Google Earth. And let's see if it will allow me to close this one. Slow the computer processor down if we've got too much going on. My Google Earth instantly heads to Washington, D.C. because I'm doing a lot of work on the star mysteries of D.C. and showing where these different roads and monuments and stuff are aligned to in the heavens. It's fascinating. I feel it's my most intriguing contribution thus far to our astrological craft, and I would love for you to take a look at my YouTube video entitled Deciphering Washington, the Star Mysteries of DC. You can find that by searching that title on YouTube, or Gemini Brett, Star Mysteries. 3 hours, 3 minutes, and 33 seconds of crazy. I hope you enjoy it, and please let me know. I was born in Boston, specifically at this hospital. I can't zoom in too far or else my lines go away, but these lines here are lines that I've already entered for my birthplace. Interesting, they seem. All right, so I was born here at this hospital. This yellow line, that is my shamanic direction. I've already mapped it in. It's saved here because I'm really interested in it, okay? So 59.7 degrees east. That is this line. All right, so we are going to explore that a little bit further, but let me just talk about that Jupiter line. All right, remember, it's the only planet that was visible for me. It was 106.25 degrees azimuth, right? So if you find that out using Stellarium for your chart, you can then open Google Earth, also totally free, right? You can go to your birthplace by typing in the name up here and search. You can go to this tool, this ruler, okay? Click that. Put a line on your birthplace. All right, so you just go right on Boston, or for me, I'm just going to go to this hospital where I was born. And now what I want to do is make sure this says 106.25 degrees. That's my Jupiter line, right? So I can zoom way out, and I'm just going to take this around the world in 116.25 degrees. All right. And I have to zoom way in so I can get accurate. But here is when you can see the degrees changing there. 116.2325. All right, bang. This space where you see these lines converging, this is my shamanic direction, my rising sign. This is also that, but the way it's coming all the way around the globe. So it's really my descendant line. And here now is this Jupiter line. They're all converging at the antipode, the exact opposite place of the globe from where I was born. All right. So I'm just put in this Jupiter line. So if the obstetrician who delivered me held me up to the only visible planet, he would have been holding me up towards Cape Cod. All right. And there's not so much in that direction of 106.25 degrees from Boston. All right. So Jupiter could have been leading, you know, the gaze over here towards Cape Town, South Africa. It's interesting. Cape Horn, yeah. But not much else. Some freezing cold Antarctic island. And then to the antipode. All right, so the other thing is I can see, well, what about where it would come all the way back to me, right? And so I can take that line, and it's 116.25 degrees, exactly opposite that. I would add 180 degrees. So oh, you know what? I'm realizing this is the wrong line. It wasn't 116.25, 106.25. Oops. So I will correct that, 106.25. Thank you for your patience. And we're going to see that now, I mean, a 10 degrees difference is huge. I'm just going to leave it there for now. It actually doesn't go through Cape Town, right? It's going through much more of Africa. Masaru, right? There's a very sacred mountain I saw here, which interests me. Through Namibia. And it's cool because I've actually had some kind of Namibian themes in my life. All right, it gets pretty close here to Monrovia. And then comes and finds me here, right? So what about in the other direction? All right, so now I would add 106.25 to 180 to get 286.25, and that will be moving in the opposite direction. So 286.25, let's just say, for the sake of our time, well, there it is anyway. All right, so now we'll go back to my place of birth, and we'll see where that goes. So now what if the doctor like held my butt up? What if he was facing Jupiter, you know, away from Jupiter while he spanked me or whatever? My first breath, right, I would have been inhaling along this line. Actually enjoy this thought. I would have been inhaling 3 of the Great Lakes. This moves through Pipestone, Minnesota, and through the Black Hills in South Dakota, the 2 most sacred places of the Lakota tradition, at least so I'm told. It moves through Mount Shasta almost exactly. And see, this is that Jupiter line that we were looking at, not on AstroClick Travel, but here, yeah? Here it is, oops, here it is, this curve going through Mount Shasta and then curving down and coming right above Kauai, yeah? So in Google Earth, I can see that that's also cruising just northeast of Kauai. The trick in Google Earth too is when things start getting squirrely, you go up to view and do reset, tilt, and compass. All right, so there's just northwest, sorry, of Kauai. And here we go, northwest of Kauai. So understand that if I made a chart, right, for Kauai, a relocated chart, birth chart for Kauai, I'm not going to see that line, right? That's not an astrocartography line. Wait, what? Oh, United States, Hawaii. Is there something in Kauai here? You know what? It's going to be super close to any. Oh, there we go. There's the Kauai town. And so if I get this to the right birth time for me, and this is not it, that is. In Kauai, I have actually the North Node at the midheaven, okay? I'm Aquarius rising. And here's Jupiter, right? Let me get rid of my chart. We'll just look at that chart. And here's Jupiter, like down at the cusp of the second, third, in Porphyry houses anyway. Sun's in the ninth. Is this still me? Right. North Node at the midheaven. So that's like astrocartography, right? This Jupiter space line isn't going to show up on AstroClick Travel, because this is really just that kind of old school astrocartography of what if I had been born in Hawaii. Well, we saw one thing, if I had been born in Hawaii, is North Node at the midheaven. This is the cusp of the 10th, the midheaven, North Node at the midheaven. Yeah? What about any harmonious aspects? Well, pretty close to Neptune's sextile the ascendant. Aquarius rising, here's my Neptune, there's that sextile. I think I said septile, it's a sextile, 60 degrees. What about disharmonious aspects? None there. I'm moving to Kauai. Sounds like a really good idea. But again, we don't see that Jupiter curve coming through because that's not on the AstroClick travel maps on astro.com, because in a way it's really not astro relocation. It's this like astro direction. Remember in Stellarium, we saw that Jupiter moved 106.25 degrees from Boston when I was born. If I travel on that line all the way around the world, I'm going to keep cruising. I'm going to come through Australia, through Pinnacles down here. I'm going to come up around Kauai, through Mount Shasta. That's that line, right? So that's that Jupiter direction. And people have been talking about these things for a while. It kind of came in and came out from what I understand, but I think it's a really cool idea. Like if I literally turned my body towards Jupiter, I would have been traveling this line all the way around the globe. Yeah. So what about my shamanic direction then? I'm doing the same thing, but with my rising sign. Yeah. And so it goes through Nova Scotia and Prince Edward and through Newfoundland. Yeah. Places I actually have not yet been. I haven't really been to France yet. I'm interested that my shamanic direction moves through Nice here in France and very close to Monaco. I love that it's cruising through Corsica, but it goes very close to Rome, you see. And it moves through Crete, coming pretty close to Athens. All right, these are all places of what? Astrology in the tradition, in the history, yeah? So does it make sense for me, who's devoted my life, my work to astrology, that it would move through those places, through Alexandria, right through Cairo? If I'd been born a minute and a half earlier, it would have moved exactly through the vertex of the Great Pyramid. And I kind of wonder about that because I'm such a so-called pyramidiot. But here we go through the Gulf, you know, and then through Saudi, through Yemen, which interests me, and through Somalia before it cruises around, finds its way to the antipode. And then this red line is like the 7th house cusp, right? So opposite my rising sign. So this is still kind of shamanic direction, but maybe more towards the relationship side. New York, very interesting that it gets this close to DC, because I've been doing so much of my work on DC lately. Virginia, you know, do I meet an Alabamian bride? My 7th house cusp line, right? Baton Rouge, right? Through the Gulf, through some places in Mexico. I'm actually going down here soon. It interests me. And then again, kind of through the ocean, I get just south of New Zealand, and then to the antipode. All the lines will meet at the antipode. So that is the idea of shamanic direction, a little bit about astrocartography and relocation, which, like all beautiful subjects of the astronautical craft, are endless and infinite, and we should explore them ad infinitum. But this idea of your shamanic direction, feel into that. And I might have said this earlier in this video, but this is a very real thing for me. I mean, when I sit in ceremonies or have sky ceremonies I lead, or even in meditations, if I call in the directions, you know, and east and south and west and north and the above and the below and coming into my center. When I close the directions at the end of any ceremony, I personally will sit in this direction. I will sit 59.7 degrees azimuth, because I feel that that is where the boat of my soul is opening towards. And this is a way that I can align my physical body to this intention, you know, of moving in this direction that honors all of these different places of the globe and comes all the way back around, and fills my heart through the back of my body. I hope you have enjoyed this trip through space and Earth. This is your friendly astrolonaut, Gemini Brett, signing off. I will see you in the astrocartographical heavens. And there I will learn how to say that word, if it even is one. Goodbye.